Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. If you're watching this video, I'm guessing times are pretty hard, right? Well, the weather's definitely gone crazy and I'm shooting this video under this roof to protect myself for some really heavy rains that are supposed to hit this area in about 10 minutes. So we might have this video on fast forward. Overall, the winds are crazy, but I hope I can deliver. So, if you're watching this video, you're probably interested in buying a affordable, maybe a 7-seat SUV for you and your family, and you're not looking to break the bank. Citroen has recently started launching very affordable cars on the market, and they are trying to rip some of the market share that Dacia had up until recently, and it went basically undisputed. Now, if you ask me, this whole process of bringing affordable cars to the market started with the Citroen C3, which is basically a rival for the Dacia Sandero Stepway. Now, if you think about that, what do you think this is? Well, this is an SUV, right? So it's a bigger car than the Dacia Sandero Stepway, so it rivals cars like the Dacia Duster, which has been basically undisputed in the B segment for quite some time. So this car is rivaling that model, so we might compare it to the Dacia Duster throughout this video. To talk about its size, this is a subcompact SUV. So basically, it's a car that everything's flying around. I'm trying to finish this video. This is going to be funny. So this car is a subcompact crossover. Basically, that means it rivals the Duster, it rivals the Hyundai Kona, it rivals the Kia Sonic, it rivals a number of cars in this segment. Size-wise, let's talk about size-wise. This car is 31 centimeters longer than the normal Citroen C3, and it is also about 12 centimeters longer than the Duster. To be more precise, this car has a total length of 4,395 millimeters. So basically just under 4.4 meters, which puts it directly into the subcompact segment. It has a wheelbase of 2,670 millimeters, which is 13 centimeters more than the C3 and 12 millimeters more than the Duster. So you could compare it to the Bigster, but the Bigster is longer, while at the same time having a shorter wheelbase. So this car should offer more space inside compared to the Bigster and the Duster. No doubt about it. Now, in terms of design, not a lot has changed compared to the Citroen C3, but since this is a bigger car, it has a taller front end, but the headlamps look roughly the same, right? The grille is roughly the same, and we do have the new Citroen logo on this car, which is a reinterpretation of the original. Depending on the equipment model you go for, you will have LED headlamps, but not all cars get LED headlamps. We have three different levels of equipment you can choose from. The base one is U, then there's Plus, and then there's Max, right? Max is the top of the range version, which is the one we're driving. Depending on the market you're in, pricing will vary. Over here in Romania, pricing starts at 18,400 euros for the U version. It goes up to 19,700 for the Plus version, and then it goes up to 26,000 for the Max version. Now, what you should know is that the U version can only be had with a 100 horsepower non-hybrid engine with a manual gearbox. The Smart version will have you picking between two choices. You can have it with the 100 horsepower version or the mild hybrid 145 horsepower version, right? But that's going to be not 19,700, that's going to be 24,500 euros as a starting price, and that version also comes with an automatic gearbox. And then you have the Max version, which is just 2,000 euros more than the Plus version, but it comes only with the hybrid engine and the automatic gearbox. Now, I think the car actually looks pretty good, and I think the size makes it fit for inner city use, where I think most people will actually drive this model. You get 17-inch wheels on all versions, but there are some differences in the material used for the wheels. So the base models get steel wheels with hubcaps, while the max version gets 17-inch alloy wheels. If that's important to you, I just mentioned it. Right, the rear end I actually like a lot as well. It comes with also a design that's similar to the C3, and I think overall this car actually looks pretty good. So what are your choices in terms of powertrains? Well, as you probably would expect, since we're talking about the Citroen and we're talking about Stellantis overall, they don't have that many engines available. So you can have this car with a hybrid drivetrain or with a purely ICE one. So there is just one engine basically. It's a 1.2 liter 3-cylinder power plant. We've seen it on basically every Stellantis model these days, and it can be had with 100 horsepower and a manual 6-speed gearbox, front wheel drive of course. All C3 Aircross models are front wheel drive, or with this one, which has been adapted and modified compared to the usual mild hybrid 136 horsepower version. So this is still a 1.2, but it has been hybridized, and the ICE makes 136 horsepower, while there's an electric motor inside the transmission that can also contribute with 29 horsepower to the grand total of the car. Citroën says this would bring the total power output to a maximum of 145 horsepower, but my guess is this car has even more, but it has been differently advertised. Basically, we're talking about the exact same setup that the 136 horsepower versions had. My guess is that they tweaked the software to bring in the electric motor a bit more into the equation and offer the car a bit more power. So the torque is rated at 230 Newton meters. And of course, this is an automatic version, and it has a 7-speed and it has a 6-speed dual clutch gearbox on board. The car also uses a 0.9 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery, which powers everything up. And since it's a mild hybrid, that's what Citroën says, but I think this is actually a full hybrid. And the reason I'm saying that is because using it, I noticed that it actually drives on electric power quite a lot for long periods of time. And I would definitely consider this car a full hybrid. Now, in terms of suspension setup, we have a McPherson setup up front and a rigid axle in the back. You don't have independent suspension on the rear axle, but the most important thing about the suspension of this car is the fact that it uses what Citroën calls advanced comfort suspension, which means you have hydraulic progressive cushions on top of the dampers. Basically, think of it this way. You know, dampers contract and expand depending on the road you're driving in, right? What this system means is that on top of each damper, you basically have another small damper that makes that entire process of compressing and decompressing smoother overall. So that's how this system works. And we're going to talk about if it actually does anything or not when we get behind the wheel and we actually drive this car. So let's talk about the interior, starting with the boot as usual. Even on the top and top spec versions, you don't get an electrically operated boot, so it's going to be manual. And this is what the inside of the boot looks like. So we're talking about 460 liters of space, and this is a double floor. What that means is that if you want to get access to your luggage or anything else at the same level as the boot lip, you can raise the floor up to this level. But if you need more space, you can lower it, and then you have a higher boot. So that depends on your needs, but this is what it looks like. We have anchor points over here on this side as well. Now some extra storage space on the side, but nothing really spectacular. But this is the 5-seat version, right? If you get a 7-seater, of course, and you raise the third row seats, you will lose a lot of space. I don't know exactly how much. Another point I want to make is the fact that we have a 60/40 folding rear bench. So that's in case you wanted to know. Now, let's open the door and let's talk about the materials. Since I compared this car to the Duster, it's only natural to compare the build quality as well, because price-wise they are very close. So this plastic is definitely not the one you would expect, right? So this is a very cheap plastic, but it's in line with the Duster, for example. But unlike on the Duster, we do have soft touch materials over here. And we also have a dash of color over here. And we do have these stickers that are meant to make you feel good, right? So let's hop inside. These are the seats for the Max version. The other versions get different seats, but no matter which combination you get, you cannot have full leather or synthetic leather. You do have this combination of fake leather and textile finish, right? So you might want to think that over. We do have ISOFIX anchor points over here and over there, so 2 ISOFIX anchor points, and you can fold the rear bench using this lever over here. So let's hop inside and check out the space you get. Plenty of room in my book. We do have enough leg room, and the driver's seat has been adjusted in my comfortable driving position. So plenty of room for people over 6 feet. Some storage space over here, some storage space over here, right? So plenty of room for everything you need to store. And let's check out the headroom. Plenty of room as well. As I said, I'm 6 feet tall, 184 centimeters. No issues whatsoever in terms of headroom. We do have a small issue over here. We do have 2 USB-C charging ports, right? We have a 12-volt socket, and we have a transmission tunnel, which is kind of high. But overall, I think you have plenty of room in this car, more than in the Duster, and maybe on par with the Bigster or even more. But that's for the 5-seater. As I said, the 7-seater will definitely have some other issues. These are the materials used on the front door cards, the same quality, right? Same soft touch plastic over here, or soft touch leather, the same stickers and some extra storage. And these are the front seats. These are the advanced comfort seats. They don't come as standard, right? And they do have a lot of padding, and they are soft, and I like that about them. But once again, this is a combination of fake leather with the textile finish. Not even on the top level trims you don't get electrically adjustable seats, so that's something you're gonna have to live with, right? So let's hop inside. Steering wheel is rather small. It's on the smaller side of things because you have to be able to see the dashboard from behind the steering wheel. This is a sort of iCockpit budget version. That's what the dashboard looks like. On the right side next to the speedometer, you can change what's shown and gloss through different valuable information bits, right? Now what I do want to point out is the fact that even though we have wireless Android connection for this screen doesn't come as standard. So the U version doesn't have a screen over here. It only has a phone holder. So yeah, you can use your phone for, you know, Waze or anything like that, and you can connect to the car with your phone using Bluetooth. So that should solve some problems. You have a USB-C charging port over here. The build quality is okay. We do have plastic over here. We do have soft touch materials over here. So it's a better finished interior overall compared to the Dacia Bigster. We do have the automatic climate control buttons over here, which you will not find on the base version, which only comes with manual AC. We do have cup holders, right? The gear shift lever, if you want to call it that. And some more storage space over here, adjustable armrest. So yeah, everything you would expect in a low budget car. What I do love about it is the fact that we do have a button over here for deactivating the speed limit warning. According to GSR2, every single car sold in the EU these days has to have a speed limit warning, right? So you can just press on this button and turn it off, which is a godsend considering that a lot of manufacturers have to have you going through different menus to do that. This is the infotainment menu, very easy to use, right? Very simple, not a lot to talk about. We're gonna start the driving part trying to escape this parking lot, which is rather narrow, and it's going to give you a better idea as to how easy it is to drive the Citroen C3 Aircross around town. What I don't really like is the fact that this car has an issue with the direction chooser, the gear shift lever. So it doesn't switch automatically from drive to reverse. You have to go through every step, you know, drive, neutral, reverse, and so on, which is something rather new on these cars. Stellantis models used to allow you to do that, but they don't anymore. So yeah, driving through this car park, you'll notice a few things, just how easy it is to drive this car. So the steering is very light, you know, the turning radius is really good, you have great visibility all around, and you don't really need a camera to park, but it's useful. We do have a rear view camera and parking sensors on this car. So driving around town will be rather easy to do. And you'll also notice another thing, because it's very quiet over here. You'll notice just how much this mild hybrid, as Citroen calls it, drivetrain, is actually driving on electricity alone. So I said that on most of my previous videos with this engine technology, but it has been highly amplified by my experience today. You will end up driving on electricity alone quite often. So the way you can tell that, if not by the lack of engine noise or vibrations, is by looking into the dashboard. You do have a dedicated menu that allows you to see which power source it is used, or you can look at the D in the instrument cluster. Whenever that D turns from white to blue, you will know that you're driving purely electric. So you'll be doing that a lot around town, as I noticed. That's why I think this car is a full hybrid, not a mild hybrid. The rather big battery also confirms that. And that's, of course, good news, because that will drop the petrol consumption, the fuel. It will increase the fuel economy, and it will also make the ride a bit more refined. And of course, you will have all sorts of advantages. Like instant torque whenever you want to, I don't know, accelerate or overtake or squeeze into a narrow gap on the fly, so on and so forth. The car is claimed to have 230 Newton meters of torque, but you do have 50 Newton meters of torque instantly from the electric motor, which is the one that will set you off in any condition. So right now we will start off, right? We're starting off electrically, and at some point, not necessarily at a certain speed, the ICE will kick in, depending on the situation, how hard you press on the gas pedal and things like that. But overall, this is a full hybrid in my book. Now, there are a few nibbles though with it. The gearbox is a 6-speed dual clutch, and sometimes it can be a bit undecisive, right? It can behave like a bit of a beginner. Sometimes I did catch the car off guard, not knowing exactly what gear to choose. And sometimes when starting the ICE, you do get a bit of a jitter throughout the cabin. But overall, this 1.2 liter 3-cylinder is very well balanced. It has a balancing shaft that does its job really good. And if you're a bit unexperienced, sometimes you might be fooled to believe that this is not a 3-cylinder. It is that refined. So yeah, I really like what they did with it. And the fact that you don't really get annoyed by how often the car switches from electricity to petrol, because the transition is very seamless and there's little to no vibrations in the cabin, does tell you that the engineers actually did a good job at refining this drivetrain. What I did notice is the fact that we don't have auto hold, which is a big no-no. Stellantis still has this issue in its modern cars. And while you're sitting at the red light, I did notice that the ICE and the electric motor are taking turns in powering the AC. So it's really hot around here this time of year. I had 40-degree weather, really hot, 40 degrees Celsius, right? And I noticed that the AC was working overtime. So compared to other hybrids I've driven recently, this car had a tendency to turn on the ICE a lot more often than not. As a matter of fact, earlier I counted it, and every 15 seconds the ICE would turn on. So if you're sitting at the red light for a minute, you will have the ICE kick in 2 times. the rest of the 30 seconds being accounted for by the electric motor and the energy stored in the battery. So that's quite interesting. I didn't notice that on the other hybrid 1.2 liter drivetrains I've driven from Stellantis this year, but at the same time it wasn't as hot during those days as it is right now. It was winter and then it was spring, so I'm guessing it's all due to the AC. But then again, just how much energy can the AC on this car need, since we do have a 0.9 kilowatt hour battery on board that should be powering it whenever you're standing still. Well, it's not a big issue. I just wanted to point it out. I just want to point out the fact that I noticed this behavior from the car. Other than that, let's talk about the suspension. Very well balanced. It is very well set up, very comfortable. Those cushions, hydraulic cushions, do work, but there are some issues with it. And actually there's only one, maybe two. One of them is the fact that if you have such a comfortable and soft car, you will have some lean in the corners. But then again, this car is not exactly a racer, so that really shouldn't be an issue. Then there is another issue, the fact that it's quite noisy. Yes, the suspension on this car is noisy. I don't remember noticing that on the regular C3, but I am noticing it on the C3 Aircross, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if it's an issue with this particular tester. It could be, but I'm afraid it's just going to be an issue with every C3 model. So far I've only driven two, and this is noisier than the regular C3 I had for testing purposes back in December, I think. So I'm curious to drive another one and see how it behaves. What I mean by noisy suspension is the fact that over sharp edges you do hear some sound coming into the cabin, right? As if some bushings are damaged or something like that, you know, a thunk. That doesn't happen over smooth surfaces, over smooth bumps, right? Only on harsher edges like tram lines, you know, manhole covers and things like that. And that's actually a shame, because Citroen models are known for their comfort and their refinement. And while this car is refined and comfortable, if I had just some earplugs in my ears, I probably wouldn't notice just how noisy the suspension is. But on this car, it actually is quite noisy, and I think that should definitely be solved in a way or another. It reminds me of the fiasco of the Volkswagen Group with the Skoda Superb or the Tiguan, which if you take the adaptive dampers, initially when the cars were initially launched, they came with a batch of faulty dampers that were kind of noisy, and that definitely wasn't great for their reputation. But that's about it when it comes to complaints about this car around town. We should also talk about the fuel consumption. Now, I do remember that with the C3, the regular C3, I had an average of 8 liters per 100 kilometers covered around town, which I think was pretty good. I know some people won't agree, but we are driving right now in one of the busiest cities in the world, so I know just kind of what kind of fuel consumption figures we get around here, and I think 8 liters was quite good. With this car, since it's bigger and heavier, I did expect it to be a bit thirstier, and it was. The average fuel consumption around town was 9.2 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which I think it's okay. Considering the AC was on full blast all the time, I think that's fine. I am very convinced that you can get even better results in different scenarios, but in this case, that's what I got, that's what I told you. So I think that's okay. If you don't think so, hit me up in the comment section below. Tell me what would be a normal number for you guys. Now let's go outside the city limits on the highway and check out how this car behaves over there. Of course, around town you won't have any issues with overtaking, right? You have a high ground clearance, 20 centimeters, that should give you you know, the opportunity to do some illegal stuff around town. I'm not talking about bad things, I'm talking about parking on a curve or stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure you will be interested in how this car behaves on the highway. So we're gonna go on the highway right now and see how it handles that scenario. As you would probably expect, driving this car on the highway is not exactly a neck-breaking performance. So you will be able to keep up with the traffic, you will be able to, I don't know, overtake, but this is not exactly the car you would pick for long road trips at high speed, at highway speeds, right? That would be the role of a GT car. This is not a GT. This is a modest crossover meant to offer people a very affordable way of driving around. So we're on the highway right now. I'm doing about 115 kilometers an hour. Let's slow down to 100 kilometers an hour and overtake, or maybe accelerate to 130 to see just how this car behaves. So that would be 62 miles per hour to 81 miles per hour. And I know in countries where miles per hour are used, namely the UK, the speed limit is usually 70, but let's see, 100, right? It takes a while to downshift, 120, 130. So the main complaint here is the time it took to downshift. After that, the car actually accelerated rather nicely, very linear, and it was quite predictable overall. Let's overtake again. All you have to do is get used to the way the gearbox works, right? So the 7-speed dual clutch electrified gearbox does have its nibbles, but it's not as terrible as some might think. It just takes a little while to get used to it. And overall, I think it can behave rather nicely. And I think the Stellantis group does have a potential winner here, because this gearbox makes the car quite efficient overall. But we're on the highway. Let's talk about the fuel consumption I recorded over here. So at an average speed of 130 kilometers an hour, the average fuel consumption was 7.8 liters per 100 kilometers covered. And I think that's okay. That's okay for a car like this. I think that's fine. I've seen cars in this segment drinking a lot more, drinking being used pejoratively over here. So I think that's fine. The main issue you're gonna have is the fact that you cannot get adaptive cruise control, not even as an option. And so you have to do the driving yourself. Now, if you're used to an older car, that should probably be fine. You're just turning on the cruise control, you know, you set your speed limit and then take care of the driving. But if you're used to newer cars like I am, and you've gotten used to driving with the cruise control system on, that could be an issue, right? So adaptive cruise control, namely, will keep you on the lane and keep the distance from the car in front of you. That's just not an option over here. It's not offered, right? So let's turn on the autopilot, if you will. You also have a speed limiter available if you find that useful. I know some people do, but that's about it. Now, at 130 kilometers an hour, you will notice that the car gets a bit noisy. I used my decibel meter to measure the amount of noise in this car at 130 kilometers an hour, or 81 miles per hour, and it returned an average of 8 decibels. So that's on the higher side of the spectrum, and you shouldn't really be that surprised by the result I got. Then again, this is a cheap, affordable car. It's not a premium car by any means, so its main role is to provide you with a good value option for your daily travels, and I think it can accomplish that rather easily. Most of the noise comes from the wheel wells and from the windscreen, but yeah, most of it comes from down low, and I think they just could have added a bit more padding inside the wheel wells. Then again, that would have raised the price, and they had to keep the pricing for this car rather low. But overall, it's not that bad. I think you could probably live with it rather easily. So what's the takeaway then? Should you buy a Citroen C3 Aircross? Well, I think the segment it is evolving in is now flooded with very good value cars. So on top of this car, which I still consider is a very good value, you have the Duster, and I compared the prices. This one costs 27,600 euros over here in Europe, in Romania. A Duster hybrid Journey, which is the top level trim, is 27,000 euros, 400 euros. So they are incredibly close, right? Each of them has pros and cons. You know, the Duster is taller. You can have it with four-wheel drive. This one doesn't come with four-wheel drive. But then again, the Duster has a worse interior. I don't know. Each car has pros and cons. But there are other choices as well, like the Hyundai Kona, which is a very good deal, the Mazda CX-30, which is a very good deal, and a number of other choices, but these are the most important ones. So at the end of the day, after telling you everything I've told you about this car, and now you have all the info you need to make a good decision, tell me whether you would buy this one or any of its rivals, and if you would buy any of its rivals, why? What matters the most to you and your family? This has been my review of the Citroen C3 Aircross. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.